Have you ever reached a moment where your heart feels heavy, where you whisper to yourself, "This is my destiny, and there is nothing I can do about it"? We all have stood there, between hope and helplessness, looking at our lives, our pain, our unanswered prayers, and wondering if Allah has already written an ending that cannot be changed. And in that moment, a quiet question rises from the depths of the soul: does my dua really matter, or am I only speaking words into the air? My dear brothers and sisters, if dua was insignificant, Allah would not have taught it to us. He would not have commanded us to call upon Him, nor would He have described Himself as Al-Mujib, the one who responds. Dua is not a last resort, it is an intimate conversation with the one who holds your destiny in His hands. When you raise your hands, you are not informing Allah of something He doesn't know. You are declaring your dependence, your trust, and your certainty that His mercy is greater than what you see before you. So today, let us pause and reflect deeply. What if the very destiny you fear is waiting for your dua to unlock a different door? What if Allah, in His wisdom, placed the pen in motion but left space for your tears, your sincerity, and your calling upon Him to shape what comes next? Because a heart that truly makes dua is not a weak heart. It is a heart that knows where real power lies. When we speak about destiny, many hearts quietly tighten, because destiny is often understood as something fixed, distant, and beyond reach, as though life is already sealed, and we are merely walking toward what has already been decided without any voice of our own. This understanding creates a subtle distance between the servant and Allah, a distance built not on truth, but on misunderstanding. Destiny in Islam was never meant to make the believer passive. It was meant to anchor the believer in trust while keeping the heart alive with hope, effort, and connection. Dua is not standing outside destiny trying to fight it. Dua is written within destiny itself, flowing through it like a river that Allah Himself placed there. Allah, in His infinite knowledge, knew before you were created that you would raise your hands at a certain moment, with certain tears, with a certain pain in your heart, and He knew what He would give you in response. This is not a contradiction, this is mercy. Destiny is not a rigid wall that blocks you from Allah. It is a vast landscape designed by Him, and within it He placed doors, paths, delays, and openings. Dua is one of those openings. When a believer makes dua, they are not attempting to rewrite what Allah does not know, they are stepping into what Allah already knew they would choose. This understanding transforms dua from desperation into dignity, from fear into closeness. Many people think that accepting destiny means silence, that contentment means no longer asking. But the most content hearts are the ones that ask Allah the most. Submission does not mean you stop desiring. It means you desire while trusting the one you are asking. Dua is an act of worship precisely because it acknowledges destiny while leaning fully on Allah. You say with your heart, "O Allah, I know you are in control, and because you are in control, I am asking you." If destiny was meant to cancel dua, Allah would not have commanded it so repeatedly, nor would He have promised a response in ways we may or may not immediately recognize. Sometimes Allah decrees that a hardship remains, but He also decrees that through dua, the weight of that hardship becomes lighter. Sometimes He decrees that the difficulty is removed entirely. Sometimes He decrees that the reward is saved for a time when the soul will need it more. All of this is destiny. The mistake is thinking that destiny is only the outcome we see, when in reality destiny also includes the process, the patience, the turning back to Allah again and again. Dua shapes the journey, even when the destination looks unchanged to human eyes. There is a deep wisdom in understanding that Allah's knowledge does not force our actions. Allah knows what you will choose, but you are still the one choosing. When you make dua, you are exercising the choice Allah already knew you would make. This is why dua feels so personal, so intimate, so alive. It is the servant walking toward Allah with awareness, not resignation. Destiny does not silence the believer. It teaches the believer where to speak. And the most powerful place to speak is in front of Allah, in the language of need and hope. Many people only turn to dua when everything else collapses, and while Allah still welcomes them, they miss the beauty of making dua as a daily companion. Dua is not only for changing circumstances, it is for shaping the soul. Through dua, Allah softens hearts, redirects intentions, and aligns the servant with what is truly good for them. Sometimes what we ask for is not granted in the form we imagined because Allah is protecting us from a version of destiny that would have harmed our faith or our hearts. This is not rejection, this is care. Destiny with Allah is never cruel even when it is painful. When a believer understands that dua is part of destiny, they stop measuring its value by immediate results. They stop saying, I made dua and nothing changed. Something always changes. Either Allah changes the situation, or He changes the heart facing the situation, or He changes what is waiting in the hereafter. The unseen changes are still changes. The mistake is thinking that only visible shifts count as answers. In reality, some of the most powerful answers to dua happen within the soul, where patience replaces panic, where trust replaces bitterness, where reliance replaces fear. Destiny is not a single line, it is layered. There is what Allah has written that will happen regardless, and there are matters Allah has tied to causes, actions, and supplications. Dua is one of those causes. Just as Allah created medicine as a means of healing, He created dua as a means of relief. No one says, if I am meant to be cured, medicine is useless. In the same way, no believer should say, if my destiny is written, dua is pointless. Both medicine and dua exist because Allah placed them within the system of His decree. The heart that truly understands this no longer makes dua with anxiety, but with calm certainty. You ask Allah knowing that your asking itself is already a gift. The ability to turn to Allah, to feel the urge to raise your hands, to whisper His name in the quiet of the night, is not random. It is Allah inviting you into a moment that was written for you long before you arrived there. This is why dua feels different from any other request we make in this world. It carries tranquility because it is rooted in trust. Sometimes Allah delays the answer to a dua because He loves the sound of His servant calling upon Him. This delay is not absence, it is closeness. Destiny includes those moments where the answer does not come immediately, because in those moments the heart learns patience, humility, and persistence. A servant who continues to make dua without seeing instant results is a servant whose faith is deepening, even if they do not realize it yet. Allah looks at the heart long before He changes the circumstance. Understanding that dua is part of destiny also protects the believer from despair. When life becomes overwhelming and the road feels heavy, the heart does not collapse into hopelessness. It turns upward. It knows that no matter how closed things appear, Allah has already placed openings within His decree. Dua becomes the key that Allah Himself designed for those doors. The believer does not know which door will open or when, but they know that turning to Allah is never wasted effort. This understanding also teaches humility. When something does change after dua, the believer does not say, I changed my destiny. They say, Allah answered me. The power is never attributed to the servant, only to the one who allowed the dua to be effective. This balance protects the heart from arrogance and keeps it anchored in gratitude. Every answered dua becomes a reminder of Allah's nearness, not the servant's strength. At times, Allah allows a person to see clearly how a single dua altered the course of their life, not because the servant controlled destiny, but because Allah wanted them to witness His mercy. Other times, Allah keeps that knowledge hidden, so the servant continues to trust without needing proof. Both are forms of care. Destiny does not always need to be understood to be accepted. Dua teaches the believer to live comfortably with the unseen, to rely on Allah even when clarity is absent. When the believer internalizes that dua and destiny are not opposites, a deep peace settles in the heart. Life is no longer a battle against what is written, but a journey within it. The believer walks forward making effort, seeking Allah, trusting His wisdom, and resting in the knowledge that nothing reaches them except what Allah allowed, and nothing is withheld except what Allah, in His mercy, knew was not meant for them at that time. In this space, dua becomes sincere, unforced, and gentle. It is no longer rushed or transactional. It becomes a conversation rooted in love and dependence. The servant asks, not because they doubt Allah's decree, but because they trust Allah's generosity. They ask knowing that even if the answer does not arrive as expected, Allah's choice will always be better for their faith, their heart, and their final return to Him. And so the hands rise again and again, not in resistance to destiny, but in complete harmony with it, trusting that every whispered prayer is already held within Allah's eternal knowledge, already accounted for in His wisdom, already surrounded by a mercy that the servant may not yet see, but will one day fully understand when all the layers of destiny unfold and every unanswered question finally finds its place within a much greater plan, where nothing was random, nothing was ignored, and every sincere dua had a meaning, a purpose. And when we talk about dua changing outcomes, we often imagine the change happening somewhere outside of us, a situation resolving, a door opening, a hardship lifting. And while Allah is fully capable of altering any circumstance in an instant, there is a deeper and more consistent transformation that dua brings, one that begins quietly within the heart. Before anything shifts in the external world, Allah works on the internal world of the servant. This is not secondary or lesser. This is foundational. A heart that turns to Allah sincerely is already experiencing a form of change that is profound and lasting. The heart that makes dua is a heart that acknowledges its need. In a world that constantly teaches self-sufficiency and control, dua gently strips the soul of illusions. It reminds the believer that strength does not come from independence, but from reliance. When a person raises their hands, they are not just asking for relief, they are admitting vulnerability. This admission softens the heart, making it more receptive to Allah's guidance and mercy. A softened heart sees differently, responds differently, and endures differently, even before circumstances change. Sincere dua slowly reshapes the way a person understands hardship. Pain no longer feels like punishment alone, it begins to feel like communication. The believer starts to ask not only, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is Allah teaching me through this?" This shift in questioning is itself a transformation. Dua trains the heart to look for meaning instead of drowning in resentment, and a heart that seeks meaning is a heart that grows even in difficulty. As a person persists in dua, something subtle happens. Impatience gives way to endurance. Not because the problem disappears, but because the heart becomes stronger. The believer learns how to sit with uncertainty while still trusting Allah. This patience is not passive. It is alive, breathing, anchored in hope. And hope is one of the greatest gifts Allah places in the heart of a believer. A hopeful heart continues forward even when the road is unclear. Through dua, the heart becomes more aware of Allah's nearness. Problems that once felt isolating begin to feel shared, not with people, but with Allah Himself. The believer no longer feels alone in their struggle. They may still cry, still ache, still feel tired, but beneath all of that is a quiet reassurance: Allah hears me. That awareness changes everything. Loneliness loses its sharpness. Fear loses some of its control. The heart feels held, even if the hands are empty. When the heart changes, choices change. A person who constantly turns to Allah begins to act with more wisdom and restraint. They become less reactive, less driven by anger or despair. Dua does not only bring comfort, it brings clarity. It aligns the heart with values that matter beyond the immediate moment. This alignment often leads to different decisions, different paths, and different outcomes. Not because fate was forced, but because the heart was refined. Many times what we think needs to change is the situation, but what truly needs attention is the attachment we have to a specific outcome. Dua gently loosens this grip. The believer learns to say, "Ya Allah, I want this, but I trust you more than I trust my desire." This surrender is not loss, it is liberation. A heart no longer enslaved to one outcome is a heart at peace, regardless of what unfolds. And peace itself is a powerful transformation. Sincere dua also cleanses the heart from bitterness. When life is unfair, when prayers seem delayed, bitterness can quietly grow. Dua pulls that bitterness into the light. It gives the heart a place to release its complaints without sin, its frustration without rebellion. Speaking honestly to Allah purifies emotions that might otherwise harden into resentment. Over time, the heart becomes lighter, less burdened by what it cannot control. As the heart changes, gratitude begins to appear in unexpected places. A believer who makes consistent dua starts to notice blessings they once overlooked. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the heart becomes attentive. Dua sharpens awareness. It teaches the soul to recognize Allah's presence in small mercies, quiet protections, and unseen favors. Gratitude grows not from abundance alone, but from recognition. And recognition is a gift Allah places in a heart that turns to Him often. This inner transformation affects relationships as well. A heart softened by dua becomes more forgiving, more patient with others' flaws. When a person constantly seeks Allah's mercy, they become more capable of showing mercy. This does not mean tolerating harm, but it does mean releasing unnecessary hostility. The believer begins to interact with the world from a place of inner balance rather than emotional depletion. That shift alone can change entire life trajectories. Sometimes Allah changes outcomes simply because the servant has changed. A heart that is calmer, wiser, and more trusting navigates challenges differently. Opportunities appear where despair once blocked vision. Doors that were always present become visible. This is not coincidence, this is alignment. When the heart aligns with Allah, life begins to move with less resistance, even if it is not free from hardship. There are moments when Allah does change the external situation dramatically, and the believer may trace that change back to a moment of sincere dua. But even then, the greatest gift was not the outcome itself, it was the journey of the heart toward Allah. Without that journey, the outcome might have led to arrogance or heedlessness. With it, the outcome becomes a source of humility and gratitude. A heart shaped by dua is also protected from collapse when outcomes do not change. When a prayer is not answered in the way hoped for, the believer still stands. They grieve, but they do not break. They feel pain, but they do not lose faith. This resilience is not accidental, it is cultivated through countless moments of turning to Allah. Dua builds spiritual muscles that allow the heart to carry weight without being crushed by it. Over time, the believer realizes that the greatest answers to dua are not always visible. They are felt in the way the heart now responds to life. Where there was once panic, there is now calm. Where there was once anger, there is now restraint. Where there was once despair, there is now trust. These are not small changes. They are signs of Allah working deeply within the soul. When the heart changes, the believer's relationship with Allah deepens. Dua becomes less about asking and more about being present. Silence itself becomes meaningful. Waiting becomes an act of worship. The believer begins to find comfort not only in what Allah gives, but in turning to Him regardless of what is given. This intimacy is one of the greatest forms of success a believer can experience in this world. Even when life remains difficult, a heart transformed by dua carries light within it. That light guides decisions, steadies emotions, and softens trials. Others may not see it, but the believer feels it. It is the quiet strength that comes from knowing Allah is near, attentive, and wise beyond understanding. In this way, dua changes outcomes not always by moving mountains outside, but by building mountains of faith inside. And from that place of inner strength, patience, and trust, Allah opens paths that once seemed impossible, not always in the way expected, but always in the way that serves the heart's ultimate return to Him, where every tear shed in dua finds its meaning, every moment of waiting finds its reward, and every change within the heart reveals itself as the beginning of a much greater mercy unfolding silently, gently, and with perfect wisdom